The coffee mug hit the counter, not hard enough to shatter the ceramic, but hard enough to make the silence that followed feel like an explosion. I didn't move. My hands, still grasping the dishcloth, started to tremble, a fine, uncontrollable vibration that ran up my arms and settled like ice in my chest. I couldn't breathe. My throat just seized up. It was my grandmother, Ruth, who said it. A casual cruelty tossed out during a conversation about old family photo albums we were sorting through in the attic. The dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light looked like something sacred, something untouchable. Then the words came, ugly and profane, shattering the light. Let me tell you how it happened, because no one else knows the truth yet. Not the whole truth. Not the way it feels inside my skull, the way the sound of those 5 words plays on loop, dissolving the last 34 years of my life into ash. The life I lived before that attic afternoon was built on the smell of David Strong, burnt coffee, and the sound of his old jazz records crackling on a Sunday morning. It was a fortress of normalcy, a simple, beautiful lie. David, the man I called Dad. He wasn't a man of grand gestures, but of small, steady rituals. Every Saturday morning, he'd tap on my bedroom door at 7 a.m. sharp, already dressed in his faded blue jeans and a clean, starched shirt. He'd say, "Coffee's on, kiddo. Time to build something." We'd go out to the garage, a chaotic, wonderful world smelling of sawdust, varnish, and old motor oil. He taught me to sand wood until it was soft as silk, to change a tire, to measure twice and cut once. The weight of his hand, calloused and warm, resting on my shoulder as he guided the saw, that weight was safety. It was truth. My mother, Clara, would join us later, bringing out thick, buttery toast and a pitcher of sweet tea. Clara was the quiet, sun-drenched center of our home. She was a librarian, a woman who smelled perpetually of paper and old vanilla. She and David had this easy, worn rhythm, a language of small smiles and shared eye rolls that only decades of shared history can forge. They never fought, not really. Maybe low, contained disagreements about the water bill or which route to take on vacation, but never the screaming, furniture-breaking rage I saw in other families. We had the house with the peeling white paint and the big oak tree that I used to climb. We had annual summer trips to that same dusty campsite near Lake Michigan, where David would sit by the fire, telling terrible jokes and making sure my sleeping bag was tucked tight against the chill. He taught me to skip rocks across the water. His patience was endless. When I messed up, got a bad grade, scratched his beloved workbench, backed the car into a mailbox, he never yelled. He'd just look at me with those deep-set, tired, kind eyes and say, "We fix what's broken, Naomi." That's all a life is. I was his copy. I got his height, his thick, dark hair, and the way I chew my lower lip when I'm concentrating. When people complimented me, they'd always add, "You're a spitting image of David." It was a badge of honor. It meant belonging. My whole identity, my humor, my work ethic, the very shape of my face was a testament to this man, this David, who was my father. I loved him. I would have walked through fire for him. We had this unbroken line of trust and intimacy that felt sacred. This was the before. This was the life that now, retroactively, feels like I was living inside a beautifully crafted glass ornament, waiting for the single, casual word to smash it to pieces. The first real crack wasn't a sound, but a chill. It happened when I was 17, getting ready for the prom. Clara was helping me zip up a dress I couldn't quite afford. She was fussing with the pearls David had bought her for their 10th anniversary, my grandmother Ruth's pearls, actually. I was complaining about being stuck in this small town, about wanting to leave and never look back. I remember saying, "I wish I were more like you, Mom. You're so calm." I'm too hot-headed. I get that from Dad, I guess. Clara stopped sipping. Her hands froze on the delicate silk. She didn't look up. "You get your passion from somewhere else, sweetie," she mumbled, her voice suddenly flat, like a tire going over pavement. "What do you mean?" I pressed, twisting to see her face. She gave a small, forced cough and immediately went back to the zipper. "Oh, nothing. Just, you're a complex girl. You get things from everyone. From Ruth, your grandmother." She was quite the firecracker. I stared at her reflection in the mirror. It was the blink and you miss it pause, the way her eyes darted away, that snagged on me. It was weird. It wasn't like her to be evasive. I told myself I was overthinking. She was stressed about the dress. It was a stressful night. She meant I got my passion from my lineage, from the women who raised me. That was all. But the phrase stuck. You get your passion from somewhere else. Years later, I found an old medical folder while clearing out a filing cabinet. Just a stack of beige papers. Most of it was boring old vaccination records, dental bills. But near the bottom, there was a worn, folded card for a blood donor clinic from maybe 30 years ago. David's name, blood typo negative. My file, sitting right next to it, listed me as AB positive. I wasn't a science prodigy, but even I knew that was difficult. Not impossible, but statistically unlikely when the mother is O positive. I remembered that from a college health class. I remember standing there in the middle of the hallway, the fluorescent light buzzing, the card shaking in my hand. I felt a quick, sharp stab of nausea. I immediately Googled it. The results were complex, talking about rare Bombay phenotypes and genetic anomalies. I skimmed quickly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. I rationalized it with the Google search. It's rare, but it happens. The files are old. Maybe the clinic made a typo. David got the wrong card. I folded the cards neatly and put them back. I never mentioned it. The brief, cold fear was buried under the weight of 20 years of memories that screamed David was my father. The countless hours, the shared secrets, the undeniable love. A single blood type couldn't undo all that. It just couldn't. Why did that feel like a lie? Because it was a lie. The whole world was balancing on that one tiny, blood type-shaped lie, and I was holding it steady with both hands. The truth didn't arrive with a dramatic flourish. It arrived in the form of a forgotten book. David had been admitted to the hospital a month ago. Nothing critical, but a nasty respiratory infection that required an extended stay. Clara was spending her days there. I was alone in the house, feeling the oppressive, echoey silence. I was sorting through his bedside table, packing a favorite sweater, a few books, when I noticed a heavy, leather-bound volume tucked behind a stack of magazines. It was a 19th century edition of poems he never mentioned owning. I pulled it out. The pages smelled of age and dust. It wasn't his usual reading. As I flipped through it, a small, brittle photograph, the size of a stamp, slipped out from between the pages. It was a picture of a man. Not David. The man was younger, maybe late 20s, with bright, almost too blue eyes and a sharp, arrogant jawline. He had the same thick, dark hair I did. He was standing on a pier, squinting into the sun. But the striking thing wasn't the man's face, it was the name scrawled faintly in shaky penmanship on the back. Gabriel. My blood went cold. Who was Gabriel? And why was his picture tucked into a book hidden in David's private nightstand? The obsession began then. I didn't sleep that night. I moved like a ghost, propelled by a silent, growing rage. I started investigating, like a detective in my own life. I found the old, dusty box of letters Clara kept on the top shelf of her closet, tucked beneath a stack of old quilts. I'd never looked in it. It was her sacred space. Now, I didn't care. The fear of what I might find was less painful than the creeping, suffocating dread of not knowing. The box was full of letters, mostly old correspondences between Clara and her college roommate. But halfway down, tied with a faded ribbon, was a small stack of thick, creamy envelopes. No sender's address. The handwriting was neat, elegant, not David's clumsy scrawl. I pulled one out, my hands shaking so violently I had to brace myself against the closet door. The letter was dated August 14th, 2 years before I was born. It started without a salutation. I know it's wrong. I know David is good, and he deserves better. But I can't stop thinking about that weekend. You feel it too. You admitted it. This is more than a mistake, Clara. This is real. I will leave her. I will move mountains. I just need you to say the word. Tell me to come home. Tell me you told him about the baby. I need to know my child will know their real father. I didn't need to read the rest. The room tilted. The air seemed to compress, becoming thick and metallic in my mouth. My child will know their real father. I dropped the letter and stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The sound was dull, muffled, like a cry held back too long. The cold stab in my chest turned into a massive, fracturing pain. Gabriel. The man in the photograph. The one Clara couldn't stop thinking about. The man who knew about the baby me 2 years before I was even born. That timeline made no sense. Unless the letter was referencing an earlier, forgotten child? I clawed through the letters, my breath coming in short, gasping whimpers. I found a second one, dated 6 months later. I respect your decision. David is a solid man, and what you're doing is brave. You've chosen stability, and I understand. I will not contact you again. But please, Clara, look at her sometimes and see me. I will carry this. I will love her from a distance. I hope David is the father she deserves. This letter was dated 2 months after my supposed birthday. I saw the date. I saw the words. The universe snapped. It wasn't just a physical betrayal of my mother to David. It was a generational, soul-shattering lie told to me about the most fundamental aspect of my existence, who I was and where I came from. My head felt light, fuzzy. I started to hear a ringing in my ears. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a terrifying, consuming calm. The nausea that had been my companion for weeks finally hit, a violent wave that left me collapsed on the floor, clutching the wooden hanger rack, retching into the empty closet space. The clue that couldn't be ignored was the date, 2 months after my birth. He didn't know if I was his. He didn't know I was his. He knew, and he gave her permission to lie. David knew. I drove straight to the hospital. The fury was a white-hot, singular purpose burning away all my doubt and fear. I found Clara in the small, quiet visitor's lounge, knitting. She looked up, her face lighting up with a tired, gentle smile. Naomi, you look terrible, honey. Did you sleep? I didn't speak. I just walked toward her, slowly, and dropped the wrinkled, tear-stained letters onto her lap. They landed with a soft, final thud against the woolen yarn. She looked down at them. The color drained from her face instantly, leaving her skin a sick, yellowish white. She lifted her eyes to mine, and in that instant, I saw the truth. Not guilt. Not shame. Just a profound, aching, decades-old exhaustion. It was a different time. Naomi, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't you dare, I hissed, leaning in close so the other visitors wouldn't hear. Don't say it was a different time. It was a lie. A choice. A fundamental, core lie about who I am. He was going to leave his wife. His son. We were so young. We were in love, and then we weren't. David was there. He was steady. Gabriel was a storm. Gabriel, I spat the name out like a bitter seed. My father's name is Gabriel. The man who raised me, who taught me everything, who I told my deepest secrets to, is a glorified babysitter. Did he know? Did David know he wasn't my father? Clara closed her eyes, a single, silent tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. He knew from the beginning. before you were born. He said he loved me, and he loved you, and it didn't matter. He was the one who insisted on raising you as his own. The air left my lungs. The ground beneath me didn't feel like a hospital floor anymore, but 1,000 jagged pieces of glass. He knew from the beginning. So you sat back, my voice cracked, the raw sound of it ripping up my throat. You let me call him Dad. You let me look at him and see myself. You let me tell him I loved him. You let him teach me we fix what's broken when the whole foundation was a massive, unforgivable break. Why didn't you tell me? When I turned 18, 21? Why wait until the whole thing crumbled? Because he was your father, Clara pleaded, reaching out a trembling hand. He was. In every way that mattered. Gabriel was a spark, a mistake. David was life. He was the man who came to every one of your plays, who put his name on your birth certificate, who held you when you had a nightmare. He did all that knowing you weren't his flesh. That's a love you cannot comprehend. That's not love. That's ownership. That's a patronizing secret that strips me of my own history. I felt my identity shatter in real time. The life I thought I had, the family legacy, the very DNA I trusted, was a calculated fiction. I didn't know who I was anymore. Everything I believed was a lie. You took away my choice to know my father, and you took away David's truth. Suddenly, the door swung open. David was standing there, pale and weak, leaning on a metal stand. He must have heard the raised voices. He looked at the letters on the floor. He looked at Clara's tear-streaked face. Then he looked at me, and in his eyes I saw not betrayal, not anger, but a profound, weary sadness and a bottomless, defensive love. Naomi, he rasped, his voice raw from the infection. Don't, I choked out, taking a large, staggering step backward. Don't you dare call me that. What did you think, David? That I'd never find out? That you were the hero of this story? You made me a supporting character in your sacrifice. I don't need your sacrifice. I needed your truth. He pushed off the stand and took a slow, agonizing step toward me. It was the truth that mattered, kiddo. The truth of our life. The one we built. Everything else is just DNA. And I didn't want you to be lost. I'm lost now, I whispered, the rage draining out and leaving an awful, heavy void. I'm more lost than I could ever be. I turned, blindly, stumbled out of the lounge, past the nurses and patients, out of the sterile, unforgiving light of the hospital, and walked out into the cold night. The world outside looked exactly the same, but the woman walking through it was now a hollow shell. A copy without an original. The immediate aftermath was a thick, paralyzing numbness. I didn't go home. I stayed at a cheap, anonymous motel room, the kind with thin blankets and the smell of stale cleaning products. I went through the motions, going to my job as an editor, answering emails, feeding my cat, while internally, I was disintegrating. I looked in the mirror and saw Gabriel. I searched for the arrogance, the storm Clara mentioned, but all I saw was the David I'd known. I couldn't separate the physical features from the man who had imprinted them on me. I spoke to Ruth, my grandmother, a few days later. She had the audacity to be calm. I knew, she said, stirring her tea. A lot of us knew. David's sister, your Aunt Stella. A few others. We were sworn to silence. It was better for David. It was better for you. Better for whom, Ruth? Better for the lie, I snarled, a wave of cold, clean fury washing over the numbness. Every Christmas, every birthday, every photograph, you all sat there, smiling, carrying this massive secret. You watched me look up to him. You watched me build my life on quicksand. You are all complicit. Her face softened, becoming less resolute and more fragile. Naomi, when David brought you home, he looked at you with a love I'd never seen him possess. He was a new father, and that was the truth. We protected that love. We protected him. We weren't trying to hurt you. But the pain wasn't just the betrayal. It was the isolation. I realized that for 3 decades, I had been the only one in the room who didn't know the core truth about my own history. My life was a play, and I was the only actor who hadn't read the whole script. I started losing weight. The thought of food made me feel sick. I developed a high, frantic energy, an inability to sit still. I'd clean my apartment at 3 a.m., scrubbing the grout, polishing the wood, trying to impose order on a world that had become fundamentally chaotic. My hypervigilance was through the roof. Every phone call I received, every door that opened, felt like a new bomb dropping. What else don't I know? I couldn't look at David's picture without seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face. I was bargaining with the universe. If I just find Gabriel, maybe David will be saved. Maybe the truth will be easier to handle. I became obsessed with the man who was a spark. I used the name and the approximate age from the letters, the limited family context, and the internet to find him. It wasn't hard. Gabriel. A lawyer in a mid-sized city 3 states away. Married. Had a family. A son about my age. A whole life I could have been part of, built on a lie I could have shared. I looked at his photo online, the bright blue eyes, the sharp jaw. It was like looking at a fractured reflection. Time didn't heal. It just provided distance. Weeks turned into months. David came home from the hospital, frail and quiet. I hadn't seen him since that night. I was finally moving into a new apartment across town. I needed the space, the geographical boundary. The unglamorous work of surviving was all I had. I started therapy. My therapist didn't give me answers. She just gave me permission to be angry, to grieve, to mourn the loss of the father of the mind, David, and the father of the body, Gabriel. I didn't talk to Clara or David much, just short, functional texts. I need my winter coats. David's resting. The communication was thin, brittle, and professional. One afternoon, I was unpacking a box of old VHS tapes David used to film every single one of my childhood milestones. I put one on, an old, grainy recording of my 6th birthday party. Everyone was there. Clara, Ruth, Stella, and David. He was sitting on the floor, patiently helping me tie my new roller skates, his big hands fumbling a little with the laces. I was giggling, impatient. I heard him say, "Hold still, bug. A proper knot lasts forever." I watched him. I studied his face, not as the man who lied, but as a man who chose. He didn't have to be there. He could have walked away. But he was there, making a 6-year-old girl believe that a proper knot, a metaphor for life, would last forever. He looked exhausted. Happy, but undeniably exhausted. Carrying a secret that heavy for that long must have been a crushing weight. I finally understood a different kind of truth. David's betrayal wasn't about malice. It was about a profound, desperate fear of loss. He loved Clara, and he loved me, and the only way he knew how to keep us was to lie. He was wrong. Terribly, unforgivably wrong. But he was human. I saw a moment of unexpected grace a few weeks later. My best friend, Lillian, who knew everything, showed up unannounced at my new, bare apartment with 2 bottles of cheap wine and Chinese takeout. "I don't know what to say, Naomi," she admitted, looking lost. "I can't tell you to forgive them. I can't tell you to forget. But I can tell you this, I see you. The real you. The one who existed before this and the one who exists now. The story of who your parents are is not the story of who you are." It was a small thing. A quiet moment of recognition. I didn't cry then either. I just felt a little of the tension in my shoulders loosen. It was the first moment I realized that my self-worth wasn't tethered to a birth certificate, but to the loyalty of people who chose to stand with me, regardless of my DNA. Herb reflection. What remains? It's been over a year. I haven't contacted Gabriel. I looked at his picture enough to know the color of his eyes, the slant of his smile, and I decided that was enough. He's a ghost. A footnote. I don't need his version of the story. I have mine. The healing didn't happen in a sudden flash of forgiveness. It happened in the slow, agonizing realization that some wounds don't fully close. They just scar over, becoming a new, tougher layer of skin. I am different now. I am not better. I am definitely not over it. The grief is a heavy, dark coat I wear on cold days. It's the grief for the life I had, a simple, innocent belief in my family's honesty. I grieve for David, who I can never quite look at the same way, but who I can now see not as a father, but as a man. A flawed, desperate, deeply loving man who made a terrible, selfish choice. I learned that truth is not the same thing as reality. The reality was that David was the one who tied my shoes, who taught me to measure twice and cut once. The truth is that he was not my biological father. Both things are true, and they exist side by side, a paradox that I have to carry. I've had to rewrite my internal narrative. I didn't lose David as a father. I lost the simplicity of that fatherhood. I lost the easy, inherited belonging. I've gained a fierce, hard-won self-possession. I am not defined by the secret. I am defined by the fact that I survived its revelation. I look at myself in the mirror and I see my dark hair, my high cheekbones, the slight downward curve of my mouth. I used to think I saw David. Now, I just see Naomi. I did the best I could with what I knew. And now that I know more, I will do better. I will choose honesty. Always. I went to David's old garage last week. He's too weak to use it much now. It still smells of sawdust, varnish, and old motor oil. The drill press is exactly where it always was. The floor is covered in a fine layer of dust. I picked up an old piece of discarded pine, still rough and unsanded. I sat on his workbench, the wood scarred by 30 years of shared projects, and felt the weight of the silence. It wasn't the sound of an explosion anymore. It was just an echo. I stood up, walked to the door, and flipped the light switch off. The weight of his hand is gone, but the scar of the touch remains.